Hello and welcome back to Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. Second weekend of Weekend Waypoints during the 2025 season. A quick note, you may already see it there on the ticker at the bottom. This is a pre-recorded episode. Long story short, as we record today, Thursday, I was supposed to fly to Jacksonville. I'll be at that tournament this weekend, but we got some snow here in North Carolina the last couple of days. And so I moved my flight back a day just to make sure I was going to be able to get to the airport. So I'll be there tomorrow morning, but it does make it to where I will not be able to record a live Weekend Waypoints tomorrow morning. So recording it here on Thursday, the live show will be back Saturday and Sunday, no problem. So my apologies for doing a recorded episode. Was not my intention to have that be the case, but just ended up being the case. So if you're wondering why I'm not responding to comments throughout the show, that's why, is because I am not seeing them live, but we will return to do that Saturday and Sunday, I assure you. So let's talk about this week's game, a tournament heavy weekend around the SEC. We've got the tournament in Round Rock, another tournament in Arlington, and the aforementioned tournament in Jacksonville, where I will be, all involving SEC teams. So there's that. A couple of teams playing some interesting 3-game series, nothing too crazy. Next weekend, we have some of the rivalry series. So obviously things ratchet up next weekend on the series, from a series front, on the series front. So, but this weekend, a little more tournament heavy. So that's where our focus is mainly going to be on this preview episode. For me, the most interesting one, and that's where I'll start, is Oklahoma playing in Round Rock. Kendall will be there, so make sure you are following him if you're not already. I assume you are. If you're watching this and you know D1 baseball, you're probably following Kendall, but he will be there and covering this tournament for us. And if you are going out to that tournament, bring some layers. It's going to be pretty chilly out there, and that's kind of this time of year, even in places like Round Rock or Frisco next week. You know, it seems like from year to year we get nice weather and then unseasonably cold weather, and then back and forth and back and forth. You don't know what to predict, but it is going to be chilly out there in Round Rock this weekend. So make sure if you're heading out there, make sure you are prepared to handle that. The good news, I guess, is that it's 4 teams that are no stranger to playing in some colder temperatures. You have Minnesota, that goes without saying. You have Oregon State, that's not exactly the warmest place in the world up there in Corvallis, and then Virginia, which plays a lot of home games early in the season, and a lot of them are in cold weather in Charlottesville. So, and then of course Oklahoma, and I think people think of Oklahoma as the South, but Norman this time of year, not exactly a tropical wonderland in terms of temperatures. So 4 teams that are going to be used to playing in colder weather, but that does not make it fun or preferable. So there's that. On an individual team, we'll start with kind of the individual teams they're going to play. They start off with Minnesota. That's a team that lost 2 of 3 to Houston on the road, a team that Oklahoma should handle. Now, could Minnesota win? Of course. Like it's a Big Ten team, that has some talented players. They're going to throw Cole Selvig, who pitched well against Houston. It was 6 innings, 3 earned runs. So he wasn't unhittable, but was solid. A guy who started his career at Texas last season before transferring to Minnesota. He's from Wisconsin, so transferring back closer to home for this season, and he's Minnesota's ace, at least at this stage of the season. So a little bit of a tough matchup there, but if Oklahoma swings the bat as well as it did last weekend against Lehigh, I can't imagine they have any issue there. That's a game that if you're Oklahoma, you want to make sure you get that opening game, because the next 2 games are a different deal. In game 2, they've got number 7 Oregon State. The most interesting thing there for me is how Oklahoma deals with freshman Dax Whitney. That's the big name freshman in Oregon State's rotation, a kid from Idaho, of all places, that Oregon State got to campus despite there being significant draft interest for Dax Whitney. And he was great opening weekend in a start against, I believe it was UNLV he pitched against. Oregon State was playing in a tournament in Arizona last weekend. I believe it was UNLV, but it's going to be tough. Like, the guy's got a good arm. Fastball last weekend averaged over 94, touched 98. He's got, swing and miss arsenal all around. And then of course the offense, I mean, they've got really talented players on both sides. I mean, the offense is no joke either. Trent Caraway, Gavin Turley, on and on. Oregon State, there's a reason they're ranked in the top 10, right? So that's not going to be easy. And then you got Virginia on Sunday, and Virginia kind of sleepwalked through their tournament in Puerto Rico to open the season. They lost to Michigan, and okay, maybe Michigan's better than we think, and it was in extra innings, but then they beat Villanova 3-1, and Villanova's not very good. And then they beat Rice 7-0, which, okay, that's a comfortable win, but the offense just never quite came alive. They scored, doing the math in my head, 7 and 4 is 11, 11 and 3 is 14. They scored 14 runs in 3 games, which for an offense that some people considered, maybe just behind A&M in terms of offensive prowess, that was not exactly what we expected, especially against Villanova and Rice, two teams that, aren't expected to be very good. So that'll be something to watch, because certainly it's a talented lineup that is going to come around to some degree, but the answer is to what degree? How much better will they be than what we saw opening weekend? Because if they're in top form, they're going to be hard to beat this weekend because that offense is that good. On the mound, another freshman, Tomas Valencias, a left-handed freshman who played some of his high school ball at the Baylor School, which is a private school in Tennessee, but is originally from the Chicagoland area. He plays on the Lithuanian national team, which is interesting. Not a big baseball country, Lithuania, but they did have a big leaguer who played for the Pirates a few years back, I want to say. But but he's on the Lithuanian national team. Pitched very well last weekend for Virginia. He pitched the game against Rice, struck out 10, gave up 1 hit in 5 or 6 innings. I don't have the stat sheet here pulled up in front of me, but his fastball averaged right around 94 as well. All 3 of his pitches generated a ton of whiff. And okay, maybe it's the Rice lineup is not very good. I think that's true. But also it goes to show if as a freshman you're carving up a Division I lineup like that, you're pretty talented. So that's going to be a tough matchup too. So that's why I say for Oklahoma, it's important you get that Minnesota game, because I don't think there's any shame in losing games to Oregon State and Virginia. Those are 2 top 10 teams. Those are 2 teams that look like Omaha teams, right? So, wins against those teams would be icing on the cake for Oklahoma, but you feel like you got to get that Minnesota game. Oklahoma pitched well last weekend. I think that's not a surprise given the talent. The Witherspoon brothers both pitched well. Cam Johnson, you still want the walks to come down a little bit. He walked 5 in 5 innings, only struck out 3, but it was better than what we'd seen from him at LSU. And so I think there's progress being made there, and it was probably never going to be an overnight situation with him. So I think it's just kind of looking for steady progress week after week. We'll see what Cam Johnson brings to the table. And the bullpen was excellent for the Sooners over the weekend as well. So they really handled Lehigh. But what stuck out to me, and again, I don't know how good Lehigh is or isn't. I'm not closely following Lehigh baseball, but regardless, the numbers were great for the Sooners offensively. And they're doing the things that we always expect them to do. They stole 15 bases over the weekend. But that's no surprise given the way their offense tends to operate. But they have a lot of guys that, batted 500 or better for the weekend. And so how much of that is just that maybe Lehigh's pitching isn't good? Or how much is it that like this offense that we talked a lot about being a little bit concerned about, just from the standpoint of, hey, there's a lot of good lineups in the SEC and Oklahoma's got some questions. Maybe it's just that this lineup is better than we anticipated. And that's totally on the table. And I think this weekend will give us some more evidence one way or the other on that. So should be a fun weekend in Round Rock. Round Rock's just a fun place. It's in the Austin area. So they do a good job there with the tournament. And the only drawback is that it's just going to be chilly. And so that's not ideal, but it is what it is. Hopefully they get all the games in. I covered the Frisco tournament a few years back, maybe it's been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 2019, been a long time ago. And it was so cold there that week, and they ended up just canceling all of Sunday. And even the 2 previous days were not good weather days either. So it was not great. So hopefully Round Rock will have a little bit better luck keeping the trains moving as far as the schedule goes throughout the weekend. So it should be a lot of fun to see the Sooners taking part. You can stream that, by the way, while we're here. That tournament can be streamed at d1baseball.com. It is a separate subscription. So it's not just if you have a D1 baseball subscription, you have the streaming. That is a separate subscription. So make sure you get that set up if you want to watch those games at d1baseball.com. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the Arlington tournament next. Aaron will be there. That is Arkansas is the SEC team taking part there. They're going to take on Kansas State. Kansas State, by the way, which is in its second of 3 tournaments to start the season. They played in a tournament last weekend at Coastal Carolina. They obviously have this one in Arlington, and the next weekend they're in Frisco. So Pete Hughes and his coaching staff not being shy about good competition early in the season. So Arkansas plays Kansas State, TCU, and Michigan. Obviously, fun to watch the Arkansas rotation. They're going Gackle, Root, and then Gage Wood. 1, 2, 3. No real surprise there. That'll be fun to watch against 3 quality teams. But also looking to see what the offense looks like. Looked good last weekend, but again, is Washington State. I think Washington State's a pretty solid team. Not a regional team or anything, I don't think, but a pretty solid team. So I think it is better than your average early season mid-major team that you squash, right? So I think there's some positive signs there for the Arkansas offense, but I'll be interested to see this weekend. It's certainly a step up against K-State, TCU, and Michigan. And in particular, I'm intrigued by Michigan. That's the Sunday game that Arkansas is playing. Michigan looked really good in Puerto Rico. They went 4-0. They obviously got the win against Virginia. It's been a little while since Michigan has been top of the Big Ten type of good. They don't really bottom out because they're Michigan and they're always pretty talented. But, with Bakich leaving and Tracy Smith taking over, it has taken a couple of years to really get moving in the right direction. But that's not going to be easy. None of the 3 games are going to be easy. But the Michigan one is intriguing to me because I'm not really sure exactly what to make of Michigan, but they might be the best team that Arkansas is going to see this weekend. So that's interesting to me. I will be at Jacksonville. I mentioned that earlier. That's Alabama there from an SEC standpoint, taking on Coastal Carolina, NC State, and Ohio State. Coastal and NC State, really solid teams. Ohio State feels like a bit of a rebuilding year. They have some talented guys offensively, but they really struggled on the mound last weekend against Arizona State. Team ERA over 10 in those 3 games in Tempe. They swung it okay, but I have to imagine Alabama is going to have a real shot, especially by Sunday, a real shot to put up big offensive numbers against the Buckeyes. The first 2 games, though, fascinating to me. First question is, will Zane Adams be better? Guy that I saw as a breakout player, my colleague Mark Etheridge saw as a big breakout player, still could be that. But opening weekend against Bradley for Zane Adams didn't go quite as well as he probably would have wanted. We'll see if he can bounce back. It did go well, the opening weekend for Riley Quick, the big right-hander returning from injury. I presume he will be on the mound against NC State, but we will see. I'm intrigued to see him against a tougher opponent and see if they stretch him out a little bit more. Because again, that Riley Quick, Zane Adams, if they both take steps forward and remain healthy and all that, like, it's got a chance to be a really good 1-2, and we'll get a look at them this weekend. Could be 3 pretty offensive games. Coastal and NC State have good lineups. Ohio State, it could be offensive because their pitching staff is struggling, and Ohio State probably needs to score a bunch to be able to compete this weekend. So could be 3 high-scoring games, but I think that would probably be fine with Alabama. They swung the bats pretty well last weekend against Bradley, so I don't think they'll be disappointed if they end up in some slugfest. They want to pitch better. They want to hold the scores down, but if they have to win by scoring double-digit runs, I think they'll be able to do that. Other things of interest here before we wrap up. Kentucky's got a road series against Belmont. This is the second straight road series for them in Nashville. Last weekend it was Lipscomb, but they played 2 games on Friday and then didn't get on the field again. So, the Wildcats haven't played in a week by the time they take the field. So how will they look? Obviously it's not ideal to do that from a sharpness standpoint. So how sharp will they be? Obviously they're still kind of learning what they have because they just played 2 games and because it was a doubleheader. They're probably just guys they want to get on the field that haven't been on the field yet because teams had a chance to play 3-4 games first week. They only got 2 and it was part of a doubleheader. So that'll be kind of interesting to watch just to see how much Kentucky still has to work out in terms of who their guys are going to be. Also interested in Mississippi State taking on Missouri State. Missouri State is talented enough to where I wouldn't be shocked if there's one game this weekend where they put a little bit of a scare into Mississippi State. I don't think Missouri State pitches well enough to really challenge to win this series or anything. I'm not, of course, anything can happen, but I'm certainly not confident in that. I just don't think Missouri State pitches well enough. But they do have some offensive firepower. If you've heard me mention this a couple times in the offseason, Caden Bogenpool is their top hitter. Just had an okay opening weekend for them in a series win over Sam Houston. But he's maybe the most talented hitter not playing in a power conference. Really, really physical power hitter. Also came to campus as a pitcher. He hasn't done a lot of that yet, but it's a huge arm. He plays center field. It's a little bit of like a poor man's Jay Laviolette in terms of it's a big body, but he's more athletic than you think. He runs faster than you think, and the power is legit. So that's a guy to watch. Zach Stewart, also veteran outfielder for Missouri State, also going to be a pretty high draft pick for them. So they've got talent. They're light on the mound, but offensively they've got some talent. So it won't be a surprise if they put some runs up against Mississippi State this weekend. And then finally, Auburn is playing Wright State. I bring it up just because Wright State is always tricky. They oftentimes kind of get beat up early in the season because they haven't been outside much. They're a northern team. They're still getting their legs under them, but they are always pesky in these types of series. And it's an Auburn team coming off of having lost a game against Holy Cross last weekend and just didn't look quite as sharp as they would have wanted and as we expected. So how do they look in week 2? Because if they come out as flat as they came out or as they played sometimes against Holy Cross, like Wright State has more talent to punish them for that than Holy Cross does. And Holy Cross won a game. So that'll be interesting because it's just a tough customer with Wright State. You can't sleepwalk through that. Because at a bare minimum, you're going to have to work really hard to win the series if you sleepwalk through it. And at worst, Wright State could get you. So that's going to be a little bit tricky there for Auburn. They have to play sharper than they did last weekend to expect to win and sweep that series. All right, folks, that is going to do it for the preview edition of Weekend Waypoints. Again, the apologies for the pre-recorded episode, so no live Q&A here, but we will do that Saturday and Sunday, I assure you, as I will be in Jacksonville covering Alabama's weekend there. Should be a whole lot of fun. I'm thankful that the weather is slightly warmer. It's not going to be shorts and t-shirts kind of weather for the fans in the stands, but it should be a little more hospitable than what's being predicted for Round Rock, for example. So thankful for that. All right. I will talk to you all again tomorrow morning. Enjoy the baseball today, and I will talk to you all